is Anna Julia Cooper, and what exactly does she have to do with vegan feminism? Well, Anna Cooper was a black woman from the South in the United States, and she was born in the mid-1800s, lived all the way to 1964, and she wrote some pretty amazing stuff in between. She was one of the first black women in the United States to earn a PhD. And I'm going to ask you to stretch your imagination a little bit today and see what we can learn from women of color like Anna Julia Cooper. Specifically, we're going to sit with her today and see how vegan feminism actually can be enlightened and enriched, stretched a bit when we incorporate these narratives from the so-called margins. Stick around. Let me convince you. So my name is Dr. Coreyleewrenn. I'm a vegan sociologist and a vegan feminist. And on this channel, I am always trying to expand the theory, introduce new thinkers, dredge up some old ghosts from vegan feminist history, and really let's talk about vegan feminism because I think it is very important for building bridges to other social justice movements. So that's really good news for the animals, but also for people who are already in the animal rights movement. I think it's really important for us to improve our literacy when it comes to diversity issues and understand how vegan feminist theory comes to be, how it's pushed and pulled, and who contributes to that. So most of you, if you're watching this channel, there's a good chance that you are familiar with the concept of intersectionality. Intersectionality is very fundamental to vegan feminist thought. Now, you get an extra bonus point, a gold star, if you will, if you're familiar with the criticism that intersectionality, when used in movements like the vegan feminist one, sometimes can be accused of appropriating what is essentially black feminist thought. So that's why it's important for us to take time out of our busy schedules as activists and scholars and citizens of the world to stop and learn a little bit more about where this stuff comes from so that we can use it respectfully and appropriately without just steamrolling, people of color, women of color specifically, who've been doing all this hard work for a very long time. So that brings me to Anna Julia Cooper. I have no evidence that this woman was a vegetarian, let alone a vegan, or even really had any sort of particular compassion for her fellow animals. But that's okay. She's a black woman in the South in the 1800s and the early 1900s, and that was pretty much the case for most people because most people are speciesist. And I could get into a whole thing about connections between racial construction and species construction, which are probably better for other videos because it's too much to cram in here. But what I wanted to do specifically by introducing Anna Cooper is broaden our playbook, if you will, beyond Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the kind of token for intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw did not invent intersectionality. She's made familiar to us through the term with a very nice, catchy, jargony word. But actually, women of color, especially black women, and also Chicana women, and lots of other women of color, but intersectional theory really is a product of black feminism, especially in the United States. And women have been doing this for a very long time. Women in the 1800s were writing on intersectionality. And I think it's great that Kimberly Crenshaw is well known to many activists, but I want to be clear, she is a legal scholar. And she has a very specific understanding of intersectionality. And I think it helps us then if we move beyond just the legal realm to see how intersectionality can be useful in other fields. So for instance, intersectionality is sort of the main work of Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks is a critical media scholar, or IP, she's no longer with us. Also, Patricia Hill Collins has done what she calls the matrix of domination, where she's also looking at intersectionality. And so she's a sociologist and she's asking us to explore structures and systems, institutions. But then you can go even further back and you can look at people like Anna Cooper. And Anna Cooper was she was interested in education. So in other words, there are black women who've been doing this work in all different fields for well over a century now. And Kimberly Crenshaw is just the tip of the iceberg. It's kind of like, when Rosa Parks gets all the credit for not giving up her seat, when actually lots and lots, hundreds, if not more, women were not giving up their seat all the way back to the streetcar days. So that was a time-honored sort of tactic of black feminism. So that's the same thing we can see with intersectionality. It's a long discourse in progress, and it's not just something that popped up randomly with the police violence and prison injustice, which informs a lot of Kimberly Crenshaw's work. So there's that sort of background. And I wanted to look at Anna Cooper for a couple of reasons. So she's writing in the American South in the late 1800s, and in case you're not aware, this is a time of Reconstruction. So the Civil War is long over, slavery has been abolished, people of color have been so-called liberated. But what ended up happening was that the capitalism basically found a new way to enslave people. And there was an initial rush to get voting rights for people of color. There was an initial rush to get political representation, and that very quickly was pushed back on and reversed in many parts of the country, especially in the South. And so you have a largely disenfranchised Black community. Now, I'm talking about the Black experience in this video, but I want to be clear that's not the only group who experienced these types of injustices. So anyway, one of the things that Black thinkers at the time were trying to figure out was like, okay, well, how can we figure out, with this newfound freedom for what it's worth, how can we figure out how to get people out of this severe poverty and inequality and basically domination under white supremacy? And one of the things that a lot of folks were advocating was, and there's many, many more strategies, and I'll talk more about these in other videos because I really want to do a video about Ida B. Wells. But one of the strategies that was very popular at the time was to focus on education. So this is key because for a long time, people of color had been barred from accessing education. And in fact, for instance, in the state where I'm from, the state of Virginia, when slavery was still legal up until the middle of the 1860s, it was also illegal to teach Black people how to read. And why is that? Because knowledge quite literally is power. If you could navigate your social world and you could read and think, read signs, read literature that can give you different points of view, like that is really controversial stuff for a white supremacist state. So now, if you have a people who have access to education, the idea is that a whole people could be uplifted by expanding their mind in this way and learning radical ideas and learning self-worth and learning theories for liberation. Very exciting stuff. So Anna Cooper was part of that. She was very much so interested in the educational uplift, if you will, of people of color. But specifically, she's looking at women in the South. When we're talking about intersectionality, the idea is not just that, oh, well, you're Black and this is what you experience, and then also you're a woman and that's what you experience, and then maybe you're from the South and that's what you experience, and then maybe you're poor and that's when you add it all up and then you total it and this is what you get. That's a more summative type of thinking about various social systems that we encounter. Intersectionality is saying there's something actually quite unique when these things intersect and the people who are in those intersections of systems. So, for instance, it's a totally unique experience then that Anna Cooper was acknowledging for women of color in the South who were trying to access education, because the system is not only historically racist and classist, but also deeply sexist. And so women of color, she really focused on them, Black women in particular. It was for her very important that they access education so that they could experience social uplift. So, of course, there's an element of respectability politics to that, which would be pushed and pulled through Black feminist discourses throughout the years. And the idea of, pulling your own self up by your bootstraps as though that it's your fault if you don't get the education. So also people like Anna Cooper were very, very clear that this is not just about your personal morals or your personal responsibility to make things better for yourself and your community, but recognizing how structures themselves are imbrued with sexism, racism, and other things. Now, here's where I bring in the animal studies, the critical animal studies, the vegan feminism, if you will. So first off, the lesson that we can learn here is from the role of education, because really when we look at the history of vegan feminism, women who actually were vegan feminists, they were vegan or almost vegan and feminists and working for non-human animals, One of the major things that they did also was they focused on humane education. That was a major tactic for the first wave vegan feminists. Well, we see that also happening for women of color and for really not just women, because W.E.B. Du Bois was also very much so interested in getting access for Black folks and thought that that would be an amazing way to uplift a community. So education was sort of flowing around in different movements. So the vegan feminist movement and the civil rights movement, all focusing, pinning their hopes on education in order to bring people out of ignorance and basically empower people. So we definitely see that parallel. But the other interesting thing is that Anna Cooper also is very much so pulling on another similarity that we see for progressives of that era, and that is trying to figure out what is the human condition and what is our propensity for social change and social evolution, if you will. And so she really did believe that white supremacy, sexism and white supremacy, a sexist, patriarchal, white supremacist system, if you will, was stunting human evolution and the development of the American culture and American society. And so opening up education, she thought, could actually be very important for advancing society. So this is an important argument that we see used by lots of progressives of that era, but certainly we even borrow from that today, don't we? This idea that by educating folks, we can move society along. And so indeed, the animal rights movement today very much relies on education as a major campaign strategy. But the interesting thing is that the underlying animality politic to that, because when we talk about evolution, inherently we're talking about us humans as animals with the capacity to evolve. And this is very much so in the minds of people in this era. We're talking about post-Darwin, when the human condition is not just handed down by God. This is now something we see that is biologically bound, and then also perhaps we as agential beings have an ability to mold that and shape social progress. So underlying that then is an emphasis on animality. And so Anna Cooper is also pulling on this popular script of the progressives and looking at the capacity for humans as an animal species for evolution. So where does evolution begin? Where does it start? Did we just end when the Industrial Revolution happened? No, the human species is still evolving, maybe not so quickly in a physical way, but certainly in a social, cultural way. So animality is very much so underneath her theory of intersectionality. And interestingly, you also, when you look at her book, so her very famous book was A Voice from the South. And it's really one of the first books written by a black woman saying, look, here, this is a unique experience. This is not just women in general or black women in general. There's something very unique to our experience, this intersectional experience of being a black woman in the South. So that's one of the very first books that implores the public to look at that. But she's actually, if you read this, and incidentally, one thing that makes it very, one of the aspects that is true of much of Black feminism is it brings in a lot of spirituality, which a lot of white vegan feminists do as well. But certainly there's another relationship with spirituality in the Black American community. But she's bringing that into her writing as well. So her academic writing is not purely academic in the objective sense that you might expect for white male writers, but she's validating the black female experience in the South, that religiosity is very much so important for that and informs that. So I think that's important also for us as vegan feminists of the 21st century, we cannot just erase a lot of that context that made this theory possible for these scholars. But anyway, so the religiosity is there, and as part of that, she's a lot of times talking about, what is a moral good, what is a moral evil, and oftentimes she flips the script. We know that, looking at critical animal race studies, that it's very, very common in white supremacist systems to animalize people of color, to therefore naturalize, normalize, and justify their lowered social status. And she must be aware of that because she's flipping the script quite a bit, and she uses animalistic language to describe white male oppressors and refers to them as evil and as beast-like. And so it's really interesting that she can flip that around and actually politicize it and maybe deconstruct it in a way. And by drawing on this more sort of higher good, if you will, not just of social justice, but of this religiosity, it adds that extra oomph to it. There are some criticisms that we can pull from Anna Cooper's work. Of course, she's not vegan. She's not actually talking about non-human animals. Although there are some elements where she really draws on the animal maternality possibilities of humans, and she really focuses on women's responsibility to socialize babies. That's a whole part of this sort of social evolution rhetoric that I was just talking about. But there's problems there with reifying some categories. So first off, when you're using animality to bring down your opponent, what does that mean for non-human animals who are being used as a rhetorical advice? So it just demonstrates how lowly their status is and doesn't do anything really to liberate them. Also, when we're drawing on these ideas of a biological sort of imperative to be a mother and to be maternal and to socialize, that can be really problematic because it reifies, gender essentialism. Which, of course, she's writing in the late 1800s, and that's fair enough. But nowadays, we would look back on that and be a little bit more critical. Like, are all women, by virtue of being born with a womb, inherent mothers? No. And can you be born biologically male and also mother? Sure. So we know that gender roles are much more diverse nowadays, and they would challenge this more essentialist perspective that she has basically, in the late 1800s. Fair enough. And the other bit that we might criticize her for is that there is a bit of sort of a reification of this idea of the good woman. I mentioned this in the beginning when I was talking about respectability politics. There's been a lot of work really in the 20th century and continues today where we push back on that. This idea that it's on you to meet some moral standard. And of course, she's very much so influenced by the Bible and things like that, Christianity. But it's creating a category of womanhood that people are being held up to this standard that perhaps is not very fair. And she's also been criticized to that end for really not so much being a voice for the poor women of the South, the poor women of color. Because really what's going on is when she's putting all these expectations on women to meet these educational achievements in order to better themselves, like this is in a way speaking to a middle class experience, because we're talking about in the late 1800s, although education is opening up for more and more people, it's still like most people who in the 1800s, white, black, male or female, you're not going to be able to get a PhD. Like this is something for the middle classes, right? And that's something that holds to even today in the 21st century. So you can imagine in the 1800s, it's going to be a lot more difficult for the average person to access higher education, even just basic education, even though the school systems are opening up. By the late 1800s, everyone has access to basic schooling and literacy. This idea that you can continue up with higher and more education, like it does seem to be a bit tone deaf when it comes to class distinctions. So she has been pushed back with a little bit of that. But anyway, what we can take from this as vegan feminists is that Black feminist intersectionality expands way beyond the 21st century and Patricia Hill Collins or Kimberly Crenshaw. This goes back well into the 1800s. And Black women have been at the forefront of this for a very long time. And it's important for us not to just tokenize Kimberly Crenshaw, because to do so is really problematic. I think we owe, if we're going to be using Black feminist theory, I think we owe it to ourselves to learn more about it and be more respectful of all the nuances and differences and distinctions and contexts before we start lumping it all together and lobbing it at whatever we're campaigning against. It just makes us good, responsible activists and more responsible theorists and scholar activists, whatever you want to call us. And the other thing that I think we can learn from this is it's very interesting that people at this time were using education. Education is a way to push through inequality. We're also learning from this that there's potential for intersectional failures. Not everyone is perfect. And we need to practice reflexivity and be open to the idea that maybe we don't always get it right, and we can only be learning and continuing to get better. And then the last bit I think is interesting from the story of Anna Cooper is that this idea of social evolution, wherever you come down on it, this idea that we can learn from other animals and embrace our own animality. I'm not sure if I would get on board with turning the animality around and lobbing it at our opponents, because to do so is another intersectional failure, isn't it? Because it basically weaponizes animals, and we're here to make things better for them, not continue to use them as insults and categories that people don't want to be put into. So that's Anna Cooper. And if you want to read some of Anna Cooper, She's quite approachable. She's quite approachable as an author. It's not too difficult to read. And because she was writing so very long ago, you can find A Voice from the South free to read online if you just Google it, or type in A Voice from the South.pdf in your search engine and it'll pop up. So put that on your reading list. Maybe just give it a skim. But I hope this gives you some encouragement to look a little bit more deeply into the history of Black feminist thought, because there's a whole treasure trove of amazing stuff there that we can learn from. And I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. That helps the channel out a lot. I'm just a little tiny channel and I want to reach more activists. So please do subscribe and hit like, and I'll see you next time.